How should we evaluate what 21 Capital, what MSTR, what these Bitcoin treasury companies should be worth? What should they be trading at? And should we compare them to things like Apple, Nvidia, or some other S&P 500 type stocks? Well, if we do, one of the measurements we might look at would be mNAV, which stands for multiple to net asset values. I'm going to show you what I found out about what their mNAVs are, explain a little bit more about that, and compare them against each other and other stocks within the stock market. My name is Forrest Hoddle. I'm a Bitcoin educator and I do Bitcoin one-on-one coaching. If you need any help with Bitcoin security or have any questions about Bitcoin, you can book me for a one-on-one session through the link in the description. When we're looking at the net asset value of a company, we are evaluating how much cash it has, how many assets it has. So an mNAV is one way to project into the future how much this company would have to grow to justify its current holdings. It's not necessarily talking about free cash flow, about business earnings, or anything like that. It's just a multiple of its market cap compared to its net asset value or its Bitcoin holdings for a Bitcoin treasury company specifically. So if we look here, we have the tickers, the market cap, Bitcoin holdings, their net asset value, and the multiple of net asset value. This is all derived from Bitcoin's price being 95,000, which it was roughly at when I made this chart. But and these numbers are going to be changing depending on what price the stock is, what price the Bitcoin is that they hold. So NAV does not include debt as well. So first one here, let's look at MSTR or strategy. Their market cap is 94 billion. They hold 538,200 Bitcoin as of making this, and their NAV of all of that Bitcoin, so that number times the Bitcoin's price, is 50 billion, 50.5 billion, and their multiple to net asset value, their market cap compared to their Bitcoin holdings, is 1.86. If we look at Mara, which additionally, Mara has a Bitcoin mining business. They have all the hardware, the rights to certain costs of electricity, management teams, all of this business they've built up. If you look at their business, they're only worth 4.9 billion, their market cap, and they hold 48,100 Bitcoin. For a net asset value of their Bitcoin holdings at 4.8 billion. So they are trading at a 1.02 mNAV. So as you can see, net asset values of all their Bitcoin holdings, 4.8, their market cap, 4.9. They're so close to trading at the value of their Bitcoin, even though they have a business that can produce Bitcoin or can mine Bitcoin for cheaper than acquiring it. And they have the ability to run the strategy playbook, which they've done in the past, which is or selling equity or selling shares into the market, which they can't really do very well because they only have such a small multiple, or issuing convertible debt, or just acquiring some sort of debt and acquiring Bitcoin for much cheaper than you and I could because they're a corporation with a balance sheet. Semler here is another player within this space, $353 million market cap, 3,303. Their NAV is 313 million, and their multiple is 1.128. And they have a medical device business that is semi-successful. They've been able to, their device isn't on Medicare, which is what it used to be when their stock price was more valuable because of that. So there's only private clients and private practices that will use their product, but they're profitable within that, and they're able to use those profits to acquire Bitcoin. Plus, again, they're running the strategy playbook to whatever ability they can. They're either issuing shares at the slight multiple here and acquiring Bitcoin with that, or convertible debt or some sort of debt financing. And then we have the new entrants to this game, CEP/XXI, starting out at a market cap currently of 12 billion. Now, of course, this is all going to change over time very rapidly with this one, but they're entering the field with 42,000 Bitcoin. Their NAV is just under 4 billion with that as their holdings. And so their mNAV is roughly around 3. Their market cap is 3 times as much as the Bitcoin they have on their balance sheet. And this is a very pure play Bitcoin. They have a business that they're going to develop over time that's very Bitcoin centered. However, their main purpose is acquiring Bitcoin and doing so probably with investment, internal, external investment through releasing new shares, convertible bonds, all of this kind of stuff, and running the MSTR playbook. So all of that is like, you know, we can look at those 4 and think, okay, where do we see some value? MSTR has the most amount of Bitcoin. They kind of have the biggest moat, the most liquidity, the most interest. So maybe they deserve to have a premium over something like Mara. But does Mara deserve to have a premium above its Bitcoin holdings? I would say yes. And same with Semler as well. And then we go to this new company, which has a lot of variables, but maybe it could grow really fast. It has a lot of big players behind it, has a lot of initial interest. It has a lot of potential. So maybe it has the future growth that justifies that 3 mNAV. That's all for you to decide. These are just the numbers and you can go off of those. So now this gets a little more interesting here as we start to compare it against some large cap tech. I think if we look at this and we only look at this and we only value companies based off their mNAV, which is, again, not really the only way that people convert things. They oftentimes will look at PE ratios as a main metric to evaluate the value of something. However, let's go to large cap. So if we look at Apple, their market cap, 3.144 trillion. They own 0 Bitcoin and they have a bunch of cash and their net asset value is 365 billion. And their multiple from their net asset value to their market cap is 8.61. So not a lot of value is going towards just the net asset or their balance sheet. It's going towards their income statements and the future free cash flows. And people are evaluating these types of businesses much differently than they would a Bitcoin treasury company. And because of that, their multiples, their net asset values are insane. And NVIDIA, of course, we can see 0 Bitcoin as well, a lot less cash, slightly smaller. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars here, slightly smaller market cap and a multiple of 34.29, a massive multiple to the amount of cash or assets they have. Tesla here, just under $1 trillion. They have 11,509. They're not doing a strategy playbook. They just hold some Bitcoin as part of their net asset value. And they have as much, 5 billion short of NVIDIA's net asset value and a much smaller market cap. So their multiple is 12. Still very, very high, higher than Apple's actually. Comparison, Apple has more net asset value. Now, I looked up using ChatGPT, I just said, in the last 10 years, what have been some companies in the S&P 500 with the most stability in their market cap? And these are some of the stocks that it came up with. The first one here, Johnson & Johnson. You're probably familiar with that. They make, like baby products and I think some pharmaceuticals. It's kind of like consumer staples, very stable company. They pay out a dividend, all that kind of stuff. Their market cap, 373, 0 Bitcoin, of course, 180 billion of net asset values for a multiple of 2.07. So if you looked at this, you would kind of think that Johnson & Johnson, they have just a slightly higher multiple than Strategy does. And that is one way to look at this is maybe future potential growth of the value of that company. Now, the company is worth more than 3, almost 4 times the amount, or I guess 4 times as much. Yeah, 4 times as much as Strategy. And they hold a lot of net asset value, but their multiple is only 2. So this one here is Next Era Energy Company. It's a utility company. Now, again, if we looked at the debt of these, they're going to have way higher debt to equity and debt to market cap than Strategy would, way higher. They held a lot of debt, these kind of businesses, because they have a lot of infrastructure. And you can actually see their net asset value is higher than their market cap, which is actually giving them a negative multiple. So in one way you could think, okay, well, this is going to be like a shrinking company if we subscribe some sort of growth value to the multiple to its net asset value. So 0.72 is below the 1-to-1 ratio. So in a traditional sense, you could maybe see this company as being undervalued, or potentially just the growth prospects of this company are not very high. Now, Intuit, this company makes tax software, very high margin business, very small amount of net asset value, which gives it a pretty high multiple of 9.67. McDonald's here, this is a franchise company, so they earn profits from royalties and things around their IP. They're also around 40% of their revenue is from real estate, and real estate is property and Bitcoin is digital property. So there's an apt comparison there. They have a more than twice as much market cap at 226 billion. Their net asset values, however, which include their real estate holdings, is only 56 billion, giving them more than twice as much multiple to net asset value than Strategy. Now, this to me is the greatest example of how overvalued these traditional businesses are. And again, here we can look at AMT, which is a REIT, and they install towers, cell towers and things like that. They have a very similar market cap, just 5 billion more than Strategy, I believe. Yeah, 5 billion more. They hold only $61 billion worth of assets, so slightly more than Strategy does, actually. And because of that, their multiple is 1.62, so it's below. So there's not much future growth in this. Now, what would you want to hold over the next 10, 20 years? Would you want to hold a company with 0 Bitcoin that is trading at a similar multiple than Strategy? I personally wouldn't. And I think all of these companies are going to trend towards the value of their Bitcoin holdings and their ability to acquire Bitcoin, which they have 0 Bitcoin holdings, besides Tesla, which is a small amount. But they also are, every single day, they're going to have less and less ability to acquire Bitcoin over time. So Strategy, all of these companies are way ahead as far as Bitcoin holdings. Clearly, they're Bitcoin treasury companies, and their multiples are all significantly lower than their counterparties at even the stable S&P 500 companies, which are these ones you're not going to see outsized returns. Maybe Intuit you could. This was kind of thrown in there. ChatGPT again gave me the suggestion. I wouldn't necessarily put it next to these other ones, although I did in this spreadsheet, so maybe I'm contradicting myself. However, my point here is that these companies are similarly valued at this metric of mNAV compared to these companies with massive amounts of Bitcoin that are acquiring tons of Bitcoin every single day, every single week. They all announce they're acquiring more Bitcoin. I mean, XXI is brand new, so I'm assuming they will. But Mara is actively mining Bitcoin. They're acquiring Bitcoin. They're running the Strategy playbook and the HODL playbook of hodling their Bitcoin holdings and not selling them. And they're using equity and debt to finance their operations to acquire Bitcoin at a reduced cost through their mining operations. And you can see that, in my opinion, these are undervalued compared to these companies, if you really evaluate it. And the other thing here too is, this is worth $50,000, this Bitcoin holdings that they have currently. But if a company like NVIDIA decided to put all of their net asset value into Bitcoin, I mean, even if they did it strategically, they're not going to get 500,000 Bitcoin because there's a cost to that acquisition. As they acquire it, that pushes the price up. So it's going to cost a lot more than $50 billion to acquire that much Bitcoin. I mean, Strategy's been buying Bitcoin since 2020. They've been able to buy it at much lower prices throughout this time. And yeah, they have their average price of Bitcoin is going up. But if these other companies started buying Bitcoin, they're going to push it up, and they're never going to be able to buy below the prices, some of the prices that Strategy was able to get. And it would cost a lot more than $50 billion today to buy this much Bitcoin. That is for sure. Even though that's what it's currently valued at. So I thought this was a useful metric. I'll post this spreadsheet in the link in the description for anyone to use if they want to. They'll be able to copy it and edit it themselves. These are not metrics that I've put in that adapt and change with the price of Bitcoin. Somebody could do that, however. And to me, what I'm looking for oftentimes, if I'm looking to allocate capital to a Bitcoin treasury company, I'm looking at it to get close to its net asset value. I'm looking at its future prospects of how much Bitcoin it can acquire if it's going to be the fastest horse. Now, I think all of these are faster horses than any of these other things, in my opinion. But which one of them will win? I'm not sure. I think MSTR has the largest moat, is the most likely to grow faster, and deserves the additional multiple compared to Mara and Semler personally. And I'm not 100% sure yet that 21 Capital deserves the premium that it currently has. There's just a lot of frenzy and hype in that as it's a developing story, and as I've been covering it on and on with this channel. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was interesting. If you want to be like one of these Bitcoin treasury companies and acquire some Bitcoin yourself, I recommend checking out Bitcoin Well. It's where I buy all of my Bitcoin. They're a non-custodial exchange, which means you send them dollars. They send you Bitcoin directly to cold storage, which is the safest way to buy Bitcoin, in my opinion. If you use my link, you'll get some free Bitcoin on sign up. You can also save your seed phrase for future generations using the Stampseed titanium seed plate kit, and you can get 15% off of that using my code BTC not crypto 15. And if you need a hardware wallet, there's a link for the Bitbox down below. You can get 5% off of that as well. Thanks everyone for watching. Again, if you want to book me for a one-on-one, if you need any help with any Bitcoin stuff, link in the description for that as well. Thanks everybody for watching. Comment section if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video.